Welcome back to Daily Fab Gameplay. I'm Lupine Fiasco, and today we ponder the question, when should we block? As always, like, comment, and subscribe down below. For those interested, my Patreon, Twitter, and Fabry information is in the description of this video. When should we block is, of course, an extremely broad question that only has one correct answer. It depends. There are infinite permutations of flesh and blood gameplay that warrant blocking or not, influenced by remaining life totals, board states, game knowledge, and a whole host of other factors. The two best players in the world could both look at the same attack and come to different conclusions on whether blocking is correct, and both could be right based on context and anecdotal experience. No video is a substitute for repetitions. Lived experience is the best teacher, and your best resource is practice. My goal here is not to give you a definitive guide to follow to the letter, but rather 4 important considerations when deciding whether to block or not. First, blocking to prevent lethal damage. Second, blocking for overall value. Third, blocking for offensive value. And fourth, blocking as a game plan. As you play your games, keep these tips in mind and hopefully success will follow. First and foremost, while obvious, block when the damage you would take would otherwise kill you. If you prefer to play aggressive decks like I do, this will often be the only time you block incoming damage. How you prevent lethal damage is the more interesting part of the question. Leveraging your remaining 1 or 2 cards to minimize your opponent's ability to kill you on their turn can be a challenge that may require some creative problem solving. However, we can ponder that later. For now, it's enough to state the obvious that blocking lethal damage is a crucial step towards victory. It's also the only consistent conclusion that every player will come to. Outside of that, how and when a player will block is much more tailored to their deck and game plan. For example, while every hero can block for overall value, some value it more highly and are better at it. Let's look at Dash, inventor extraordinaire, who has a few aspects of her design worth mentioning. On most turns, her damage scales linearly. This is contrasted by a hero like Zen, whose damage scales exponentially. Most of the time, Dash will get roughly the same value per card out of 1 card as she would out of 4. And because her deck generally includes a healthy count of yellows and blues, she tends to block for as much or more value than she could deal on offense. Linear scaling and low-value cards add up to equal a hero that usually can play an entire hand for offensive value, but more often should be played for overall value. Imagine a scenario in which Dash is attacked for 12. Dash has 4 blue 0-60s in hand, an induction chamber in play, and a Tecloplasma pistol equipped. Both players have a remaining life total of 40. Deck legality issues aside, there are several ways Dash can play out this hand. If Dash declares no blocks and takes 12, she could then crack back with 4 0-60s for a total of 8 damage. This is undoubtedly her worst line of play. Alternatively, Dash could attack with 3 0-60s for a total of 6 damage, then pitch the 4th 0-60 to pay for activations of her pistol and the chamber. The pistol fires for 2, is given go again by the chamber, and can be reloaded and fired for another 2. This brings us to 10 damage. I wouldn't call this Dash's best line of play in this situation anyway, but it's certainly better than attacking for 8. A third line would be to block out completely. By prioritizing defense over offense, Dash gets more value out of her 3-block, 2-power 0-60s. She will deal no damage on her turn, but gets 12 points of value out of her hand, more than in our previous 2 scenarios. Dash's final line is to block 9 damage with 3 cards, then use the 4th to pitch for her pistol chamber pistol line. This is worth 13 points of value and is her most efficient line of play. Returning to our earlier statement of it depends, there are situations in which any of these lines of play are optimal. I'm presenting this simple example as a way of demonstrating overall value. Regardless of whether Dash is correct in blocking 9 and attacking for 4, 13 points of value is the most she can get from her hand of cards. We can take this example and, with a slight adjustment in life totals, demonstrate when you might disregard maximizing overall value in favor of offensive value. Rather than both heroes starting at a life total of 40 apiece, imagine that Dash is at 13 to her opponent's 1. In this new situation, declaring no blocks and cracking back for suboptimal offensive value looks a lot better. Dash can afford to take 12 damage and crack back, with 10 dealt over 5 chain links for lethal. Similarly, if Dash instead has a remaining life total of 11 to her opponent's 1, Dash can block with a single card, take 9 damage, and crack back with 8 dealt over 4 chain links to strip her opponent's hand. Having no cards left to attack with gives Dash the opportunity to keep a 4-card hand and very likely win the game on her next turn. Turning 4 cards into 10 damage is below rate, but sometimes that's all you need to win the game. How good your hero is at playing for value versus maximizing damage is easy to determine by answering a couple questions. How many 2 blocks are in your deck, and how well does your damage scale with the number of cards available? Fi is an excellent example of a hero that is both bad at blocking and deals more damage with more cards in hand. The staples of every Fi deck, the Draconic Ninja Go Again attacks, all block for 2. Art of War and Phoenix Flame don't block at all. Fi's hero power requires that you keep multiple cards in hand to discount its cost. You'll need 2 cards at minimum to buy back the Phoenix Flame from graveyard. Additionally, Fi's power cards, Art of War and Spreading Flames, get more value the more attacks you play, in some cases literally, as Spreading Flames will get no additional value on anything fewer than 3 cards. Fi is a hero that will play for offensive value in most situations because it's what he was designed to do. This won't always be the case, and sometimes even Fi should play for overall value instead. At times, stalling will provide you with the resources you need to win the game. Sticking with our ninjas, Katsu and Zen both benefit from having strong combo cards in their discard when they play Bonds of Ancestry. It may be correct to block with a blue 100 Winds or Descendant Gustwave early so that you can guarantee you'll have one to tutor later with Bonds. Even as Fi, you'll sometimes win the game with a big Art of War or Spreading Flames turn. For example, blocking out Victor with your Brand with Cinderclaws and Rising Resentments can be more beneficial than playing them. You deny Victor clash value while you search for a turn that goes way over the top of his defense. Being able to determine when to pivot to a value plan separates the top players from the not players, and is a sense you'll hone over countless repetitions and hours of practice. Finally, let's talk about blocking as a game plan rather than a turn-by-turn decision. Fatigue is the colloquial name for a deck that blocks heavily and plays to the idea of running an opponent out of cards in their deck, at which point the fatigue player is free to win by attacking unhindered with their weapon. We haven't seen a truly dominant fatigue deck since Oldhim rotated out of the format, but Bravo, Victor, and most recently Riptide are all giving it their best shot. Fatiguing someone goes beyond blocking with 4 cards every turn. The most successful fatigue strategies will pitch cards more often than block with them to keep their decks as full as possible. In this way, the fatigue deck simply waits you out. You expend cards to attack, but they recycle theirs to defend. Pitching to effects like Ramparts of Ram's Head, instants like Oasis Respite, or defense reactions like Staunch Response are ways that a fatigue deck can generate defensive value without spending too many cards. Staunch Response, for example, blocks for 2 or 3 cards worth of value while only expending 1 card from deck. Cards like Remembrance or Quiver of Abyssal Depths refill the deck, and generally with defensive or disruptive options. Guardians can bring a fatigue by damage style of play, running you out of cards by encouraging you to block damaging, disruptive on-hit effects like those of Crippling or Spinal Crush. Riptide can buy his Murky Waters back with his Quiver. This late-game dominant effect is both a strong source of damage and recurs cards from his graveyard. Blocking with threats for early value, then buying them back for late-game lethal is a very powerful line of play. And since a fatigue deck will likely play many cards with similar effects, going above 60 cards doesn't affect consistency like it would for an aggressive deck like Fi, whose killing power is contained in only 1 or 2 cards. When your Assassin, Guardian, or Riptide opponent presents a 72 card deck for you to cut, you know you're in for a long game. However, you don't need to play a Fatigue deck to adopt a Fatigue style against certain enemy heroes. Any aggressive hero that leverages cards in deck as expendable resources is one that can be subjected to Fatigue, provided your deck brings a density of 3 blocks and armor. Big offenders of this deck as a resource style of play include all 3 ninjas, as well as Dash.io, just to name a few. I'm talking heroes that win off the back of specific high impact cards, examples being Ancestral Harmony, Art of War, Maximum Velocity, and High Octane, and whose ability to close games drops significantly without those cards. All 3 ninjas will pitch weak blues to play strong reds. Dash.io does the same while also literally burning cards from her deck by boosting. If you find yourself in a position where you can't race these heroes, simply blocking until they run out of gas is a viable strategy. The ninjas will run out of red attacks, and even Zen's turns are weak if he only has blues left to play. Dash.io can easily fatigue herself trying to boost out 4-card hands, and that's assuming she has anything left besides items in her deck by the second cycle. Sitting down with the intention to fatigue as an aggro deck is generally ill-advised, since your deck prominently features cards that likely won't block at the level of a Guardian, or at all if you play Ninja or Brute. Pivoting to a fatigue strategy is best done after attempting to race and recognizing that you won't win, and it can be an out if you notice your game running long. Efficient blocks and surgical use of disruption can go a long way towards stealing a win from a reckless opponent, and paying attention to the number of cards left in their deck and power cards in discard and banish is a good habit to start developing now. Blocking well in Flesh and Blood is one of the hardest skills to develop. Committing to exclusively blocking for efficiency or offense will only get you so far. Recognizing when to pivot between the two, or even switch plans to full fatigue, especially when your deck isn't built to do both, is how you'll start stealing games that you had no business winning. You won't notice the percentage point increase most of the time. Blocking well will start coming naturally, and wins will fall into your lap like they belonged there the whole time. But occasionally you'll see the line to unexpectedly trade value for stopping a non-hit that will turn a game on its head. And hopefully this video helps you do just that. We've talked about blocking to live, for overall and offensive value, and to fatigue, and now it's on you to start practicing in your own games. Start paying closer attention to your overall value compared to your offensive value, and determine whether the bigger number is better in the current game state, and the answer may surprise you. My 3-week break from gameplay reviews begins now, and will end once Rosetta spoilers liven things up. Overwhelmingly and unsurprisingly, 84% of voters asked for Fab-adjacent content during the break. I'll be working hard to accommodate, and am aiming to post at least 1 video per week, if not 2 or 3. I have a few ideas already, but for other content, well, that's up in the air. If you have ideas for content you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. I'll also post a little non-Fab content to see how it does, and give you all a peek into how I'm spending my break. Spoilers, I'm playing Hades too. I really appreciate you all hanging around for as long as you have, and I'm excited to pick things back up in September with a new hero, new cards, and a new meta. Until then, I hope you enjoy the content I have in store for you, and until the next time I see you, take care.